It's a tale of two employees in a job market right now. For some employees, it's the best of times. They're seeing the strongest and best job market in history. For other employees, it's the worst of times. They can't find a job regardless of how many jobs they apply to, and when they do find a job, it's below their skill set and barely covering their rent. And just recently, KPMG, one of the big four global accounting firms, put out an article titled "Why the Job Market is Still Cooling," talking about how the job market in the United States has been cooling between 2022 and 2024 steadily, and it will continue to cool through 2024. But that's really just the beginning. And with the high inflation that we've seen over the last few years, this also comes with employees wanting and needing more money. And this then puts more pressure on the employer, the companies, to find alternatives to stop paying the employees using new technologies and intelligences. For example, food chains like Chipotle and Sweetgreens are turning to robots to start making your food. And then of course you have digital brands that are replacing their human employees with artificial intelligence workers. And that's why today I want to go over three things. Number one, I want to go over what's going on in the job market today. What is the current state of the job market? And then number two, I want to talk about the changes that we're seeing happen in our job market now in 2024. And then number three, I want to wrap up, what does this mean for you and what you should be doing today, that way you can best protect yourself. So let's start by talking about number one, what is the current state of our job market today? Now, before we jump into that, I want to let you know that on April 2nd, 2024, I'm hosting a live, free, and virtual real estate investing workshop where I'm going to be going over my own real estate investing strategies. This is a completely free workshop. You'll be able to ask me questions, and I'm going to be going over things like how do I find a good location to invest in, how do I find a good property that's going to actually cash flow, and how can I actually maximize, or what do I do to maximize the profits on a deal. So if you're thinking about investing your money in real estate, or you want to see how you can invest in real estate better, come join me on this workshop. It's going to be a lot of fun and it's free. So if you'd like to join me on this real estate investing workshop, I got the link for you to join down in the description below. Just make sure you register soon because there's a limited number of people that can join me live. So starting with the current state of the job market, we're seeing an interesting data source of what's happening in the job market today. We're still seeing some of the lowest unemployment in the history of modern day America. And these low unemployment numbers translate to the strongest housing market in about 70 years. What this means, according to the data, is if anybody's looking for a job, they should have no problem finding a job because just take a look at this. This is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and what it shows us is that there are 0.7 unemployed people per job opening. That means as of the time of me recording this video, there are 1.4 job openings for every unemployed person out there in America today. So if you're unemployed, you should have no problem getting a job. The problem with that is it's not really working like that in reality. People across the country have been feeling this frustration that they can't find a good paying job in their skill set. The real reason I wanted to lay this foundation is because we're seeing, number two, a lot of changes happen in the job market where essentially a lot of people are saying that the job market is not going to be as strong as it is today in the future. And if today the job market is supposedly the strongest it's ever been, but a lot of people are kind of struggling in this job market, what is it going to look like in 12 months, 24 months, and 36 months when it's not going to be as strong as it is today? Which brings me to number two, what are these changes that are happening in the job market right now? I'm going to go broad and then I'm going to go narrow. So starting broad, businesses have been seeing a lot of changes in the economy, partially due to the higher interest rates, just like everybody else, because these higher interest rates put a lot of pressure on businesses to make more money, either because now they have to service more debt costs, or because people have higher costs and they have less money to spend at businesses. And so now with this slowing economy, that means businesses might not be able to make as much money as easily as before, which means businesses are now pushing for more productivity. They're pushing for more efficiency from their employees. Now, this is coming at a time where we've also been seeing all this high inflation, which means not only are their costs higher, because inflation isn't just what you and I have to pay when we go to the grocery store, it's also what the grocery store has to pay to purchase the raw materials. So now when businesses have higher costs, they also have to pay their employees more money because, well, over the last few years, in addition to seeing the high inflation for the consumer side of things, we've also been seeing this wage boom over the last few years where employees saw their salaries rise rather quickly in terms of historical numbers. Now, the only problem with that is for a lot of people, wages just didn't rise fast enough to keep up with the higher cost of living, but that's more of a consumer issue. Businesses are paying more money for employees today. They have to pay more than they did before because, well, inflation. And now because they're having to pay more and more money for the employees, that's an additional cost for the business on top of the higher interest rates, which means now businesses have to be more creative to be productive. Now, one of the things that businesses are trying to do is figuring out how they can get their employees to be more productive, how they can get more value out of each employee. And the second thing they're trying to do is figure out how they can automate some of this work and not keep paying for these employees. So let me start by talking about this one, which is how they can get their employees to be more productive. Now, as companies are trying to drive more value per employee, you're seeing a lot of things happen. Some companies are creating new programs to make each employee more productive, like what Google did. Some companies have been doing layoffs to remove some of the fat out of their company, essentially removing the employees that weren't doing their end of the work. And then you have some companies now that are pushing this return to office mandate because they believe that that's going to be more productive for their employees. So you're seeing a whole spectrum of ways that companies today are looking for new ways to find more productivity and efficiency out of each employee because, well, if they're not doing that, then they're not going to be able to continue growing their business much longer. On the other side of the same coin, you have a lot of companies saying, well, we can't keep affording to pay our employees more and more money, so now we're going to look to outsource this, not to Mexico, but through robots as a way to control our costs. Because when you have inflation, that means employee salaries keep going up year after year after year after year, not to mention benefits, not to mention everything else. But when you have a robot, you don't have to pay for health insurance. You don't have to pay for the payroll salaries. You don't have to pay for the higher inflationary salaries through a robot. You just pay to maintain the robot. And now you can reduce and control your costs much better than if you have a person. Not to mention the fact that people have sick days. They have babies. They have weddings. They have other things going on. They have emotions. Robots don't. Now let's take it one step back and paint the whole picture. How did this all start? Well, it all started with the inflation problem that we were discussing before. And if an employer, now a company, cannot find a way to get more productivity out of their team members, out of the employees, or if the employer cannot find a way to reduce and control their costs, what are they left with? Well, then they have to pass down these costs to you, the consumer. And this is some things that we've been seeing happen. For example, Five Guys has been making the news all over the place because of how much it costs to get a burger and fries and a drink there because they have increased their prices by something around 40% in just the last few years. So now, here's the question. What would you rather have? Would you rather see more productivity? Would you rather see more automations? Or would you rather pay higher prices? Because ultimately, it's the customers that are funding the employees' salaries. It's not really the company itself. I mean, yeah, the money is coming out of the company's bank account, but the company gets the money from the customers. If customers can't keep paying the higher prices, the company has no money to pay the employees. And so if they want to keep getting money from customers, either they're going to have to find a way to reduce costs or they're going to have to keep increasing the prices. And this is the dilemma that has started, especially after the inflationary cycle we've seen over the last few years, because this inflation has caused the prices of everything from your raw materials to your rent, to your employee salaries, a whole lot higher. So now employers and companies are having to figure out, how do we either keep increasing the prices or how do we find a way to reduce our costs? And this is that balance now that employers and companies are trying to manage. And this is why you're seeing a lot of changes happen in the job market because, well, a lot of companies are trying to find a way to reduce costs while also increase prices because they need to maintain that margin because, well, every company needs to maintain a margin. Which brings me to number 3. What do you need to know? Well, number 1, let's talk about on the job side. We are seeing a change in the workforce. Period. Companies across the board, across the spectrum, I don't care what industry you're in, are finding ways to be more efficient and productive. And you're seeing companies pretty much across the spectrum letting people go who are not coming to work and actually putting in their full efforts. Between 2020 and 2022, it was a very different workplace because companies were in that boom growing phase because people were spending money like crazy. Everybody had the stimulus checks. Everybody had the money from the government. Government were pumping the economy with money. And so companies really were focused on growth rather than cost cutting. Today is the opposite. Today is more on efficiency and productivity, which means if you were just going to work just to get by, well, that puts you more closer to the chopping block, especially depending on which industry you're in. Some industries are a lot tighter than others. And so if you are worried about your job, well, you might want to consider coming to work and putting in that full effort and really producing for your company. Now, in addition to that, this is where you also want to understand, number 1, what industry are you in? And number 2, what is the health of your company? And this should be, at least to some extent, transparent, depending on which company that you're in. But you want to get a general idea. Like some industries are struggling more than others. For example, we've been seeing the realtor industry struggle quite a bit. We've been seeing a lot of layoffs in the tech sector. We've been seeing a lot of changes in the banking sector. So depending on which industry you're in, you might be more susceptible to changes in your job market compared to others. And that's the first place you want to start. Then take a look at your particular company. Is your company well capitalized? Do they have cash to protect them against further downturns in the economy? And this is really you want to decide what type of career do you want, because unfortunately there's a lot of people that are just working because they have to. But it's a lot easier for you to put in that 110% when you're doing something that you care about, when you're passionate about the mission that you're trying to do. Now, I'm not saying do it for free. It's not a charity. You should get paid adequately, but it's a lot easier for you to show up and actually produce when you do something that you love, you do something that you're having fun with, you do something that you actually enjoy. And if you can't see that in your current role, then maybe consider getting a certificate, getting some sort of change in your career, and getting serious about what you want to do, because you don't want to do something that you're just there to get a paycheck, because that's a very miserable and distressing way to live your life. I mean, it is what it is, and I understand a lot of people have to do this to get paid. Well, this is where you want to start spending your evenings and your weekends learning something and trying to figure out how you can get a new career or create your own business or your own side hustle. That way you don't have to do something just to get a paycheck. Do something that gives you fulfillment and value out of your job as well. Then, in addition to that, when it comes to what you need to know, you know I'm going to talk about this. You got to also take care of yourself financially. That means start building your savings if you don't have one already. Savings should be there to protect you against an emergency in case your employer, your boss, runs your company into the ground and they go bankrupt. You want to have some savings to protect you against that. Maybe you get laid off or fired. You want to have some savings to protect you against that. Or maybe you get so sick and tired of your company you just want to leave. You want to have some savings to fall back on. That way you don't have to go out and take any job that you can find. That way you have some cushion to do some reflecting and find a career that works for you. Having that cash savings in your bank account can provide you with so many options, because now you're no longer desperate. So if you want to avoid the desperation, have some cash in the bank. Then, in addition to that, if you really want to become wealthy, if you really want to be free, the only way that you can do that is by investing your money. When you invest your money to the point where you have assets that can fund your base expenses, well, now you are financially free. Now, I get it. This is not something that's easy. It's not something that's going to happen in 2 months or 2 years. This is going to happen over years, in many cases, decades. But the more aggressive you get on this, the more money you put towards your investments, the faster you will get there. And this is where now it's really up to you to decide, how quickly do you want to be financially free? How quickly do you want to build that wealth? And the quicker you want to get there, the more aggressive you need to be with your investments. That means the smaller you need to live, the less you need to spend, the more you need to invest. Now there's 2 ways to do that. You can work to spend less, and you can work to earn more. So now, as you're working to do this, if you want to have the financial freedom so you don't have to be at the mercy of anybody else, you can do things, do work on your own terms, well, that requires you now to work to put your money into investments that will pay you. That way you can use investments to live off of. That way you don't need the paycheck from your job to live off of. Now, it's going to be tough. That's why I call it a decade of sacrifice. But if you're willing to put in that decade of sacrifice, you will have a lifetime of freedom ahead of you. That requires you to make that first step and decide that you want to be free, which requires the financial education on your part. Now, one of the ways that you can invest your money is, of course, in real estate. And as a reminder, I'm hosting a live and free real estate investing workshop. I would love for you to join me there. I got the link for you down in the description below. If you're in a situation like the majority of America where you have no financial protection, then you're so reliant on your next paycheck or your business income or your next sale or your next deal that you have no financial cushion and you have no financial breathing room, that you have no choice but to be so reliant on your job because you have no financial security for yourself.